Since starting this podcasting journey 5 years ago, I've grown tremendously, not only in my comfort on camera, but in my voice. If I think about just even the last 12 months, the last 18 months, what have I been doing to help myself get to this point in my life where I'm starting a brand new podcast a year ago and I'm continuing with it this year, even though 3 months ago I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going? Well, of course, I have to tell you about my 2025 resolutions. There's something I came up with called my year of no. I know we've all heard of my year of yes, or yes year, or yes attitude, meaning like you're going to say yes to everything that comes your way. I'm taking a bit of an opposite approach and choosing to say no to some specific things that maybe in the past I had a hard time saying no to. The three that I first identified were welcome to 2025, becoming you. I made some notes for myself as well so I can stay on track and make sure that I cover what I want to cover in this episode. And if you like this sort of content, if you're interested in these solo sessions, I would love to hear your feedback, and I'm happy to do more of them in this way. So typically I host these episodes and I have a guest on the show and someone to interact with, ask questions, and hear about their journey. And when I was asking actually a new guest to be on the show who will be in one of the episodes this year, she responded to me, do I ever have anyone on the show to ask me about my journey of becoming and about my life? And immediately I was like, no, but I'm going to be writing a book, don't worry. And afterwards, I thought about that a little bit more. And although I am going to be sharing my life story at some point in a printed manual, which I'm so excited for, and I will definitely keep you posted, that is far enough out into the future that I wanted to maybe find a way to incorporate my life story in this Becoming You series in little ways outside of simply interviewing guests. Since starting this podcasting journey 5 years ago, I've grown tremendously, not only in my comfort on camera, but in my voice. Prior to hosting these shows, Winning Wednesday and Becoming You, and then producing 3 different podcasts for 3 different companies, I probably would never have just organically signed up to do this. It just started on a whim, and then like a snowball grows, it grew bigger and bigger. And now I'm really happy with where it is. But had I just planned for this to happen, I think my shyness or insecurities would have gotten the better of me, and I never would have made it this far. So I'm really grateful for everyone that's been part of the journey, who took a chance on me when I didn't even know what I was doing, and has given me some feedback along the way too that I've been able to incorporate into this year's production to hopefully make it better than ever. And to get us started, like I said, I wanted to share a little bit about my own journey, and not necessarily going deep or wide, because that will be in the book. But if I think about just even the last 12 months, the last 18 months, what have I been doing to help myself get to this point in my life where I'm starting a brand new podcast a year ago and I'm continuing with it this year, even though 3 months ago I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going? What does my thought process, what does my planning look like? How do I recharge my batteries? How do I look inward and work on the stuff that's going on inside of me to make the world that's outside of me a better place? So I brought a few books with me, a little bit of a show and tell. And these are not all of the books that I've read in the last year and a half, but these are my top 5 in terms of the ones I typically recommend. And they're ones that have helped me tremendously. So first off, I have Choice Theory by William Glasser. He's an MD. And this book is for anyone who maybe like me. I mean, it says right at the top, choosing the life you want to live and staying close to the people you need. So with that in mind, this book is all about how do we get our needs met while still managing the needs of those around us to some extent. But my biggest takeaway from the book was at the time that I read it, I was in a place of feeling like I didn't have free will, and life was happening to me. And I really struggled with the idea of destiny versus impact, and what can we do in our day to day, and how much control do we really have over things. Reading this book gave me the opportunity to focus on areas of my life that I can experiment in and take actionable change or changeable action in my life to see and play around with what do I actually have influence over. On the other half of that is to let everyone else around me live the life that they want to live. If they want to make a choice, I'm not going to try to control them. And there's a lot of peace in that. I think often people feel really comfortable around me because I'm allowing them to be themselves in maybe ways that different folks in their life don't allow them to be themselves. That said, when I see certain sides of people, of course, I have to choose to protect myself maybe in different ways, but that kind of goes without saying. And yet there's something called boundaries, which a lot of you may be familiar with, but they are very different from rules. So a boundary is something that you know within yourself you can't tolerate, that's a line for you, whatever the case is. And the opportunity arises if and when someone approaches that line or crosses that line, then you have the chance to stand up for yourself, to assert this boundary. And it doesn't mean that the other person has to change. It means that you get to show up for yourself and have a consequence to that behavior. And if the behavior continues, then the consequences continue as well. And that can look different for different folks in different circumstances. But it's something to keep in mind too, as we try to keep the people we need in our life while still showing up authentically for ourselves and knowing that life is not simply happening to us. There are a lot of external factors that we don't have any control over, but finding balance and keying into what you can control will ultimately lead to a more positive health space in your mind. So I really recommend this book, Choice Theory. It's actually a book I need to reread at this point. So I will add it to my pile of rereading over there. Since that book, I read 2 more books, No More Mr. Nice Guy and The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. Now, these 2 books are great in similar and different ways. No More Mr. Nice Guy, I assumed it would be all about the nice guys in the world and was going to be an opportunity for me to play the blame game. What I quickly found out is how much this resonated and hit home with me and exposed areas of opportunity within me where I may be the nice guy, I may be people pleasing or fawning as a, trigger response or whatever you want to call it. But that's not how we get ahead in life. Our needs are important. We have to get them met. And in order to know if people really like the real us, we have to show up authentically. If we're just showing up as a nice guy and thinking that, hey, if I do this for you, you're going to like me, not only is that very transactional, but it is technically manipulative as well. You're not giving the chance to the other person to get to know the real you. But by ending that era of your life, you can step more authentically into the world that you exist in and around the people that are in your life and give them a chance to know the real you. And in many ways, you get to learn more about yourself too. So you're giving yourself the chance to dig deeper and figure out who you are outside of what you can offer to other people. And any of those frustrations of revolving your life around someone else or doing things just because you think someone else will be happy, but at the end of the day, you're not happy and you're a bit resentful or regretful of the things that you missed out on because you prioritize other people and their needs, this will really help you manage that. So give it a shot. Like I said, along similar lines, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, A Path to Peace and Power. I found this book to be really astounding because perfectionism typically has a very negative connotation, as I'm sure many of you know. And yet this book outlined at least 5 different types of perfectionism that we can have, and it didn't vilify them. If anything, putting words to these descriptors gave me that sense of empowerment where I know now how to leverage these aspects of myself and channel them into ways that will actually help me in life. And I can also see areas where I can just let go and recognize that the procrastinator side of perfectionism versus the type A side of perfectionism may be in conflict, or they may be at opposing ends, but there is a time and a place for all of them. And if you are a perfectionist in any capacity, or if you know a perfectionist, this may help you get to understand yourself and those around you better, and perhaps lose a little bit of control along the way. Now, I read these two books in the last couple weeks, When Religion Hurts You and No Bad Parts. I found them to be incredible bookends of each other. And within reading the books, I actually attended a women's retreat. So serendipitously, these two books and the timing of my life worked out so perfectly. Whether that's the same for you or not, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just sharing how it happened for me. So this one, When Religion Hurts You, Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Control Religions, or HCRs, as the book refers to them. Now, when you think about religion, I know everyone has an association in their mind, positive, negative, neutral, doesn't matter. But what I liked about this book is that it didn't just focus on one religion. It grouped them together from a fundamentalist perspective, which doesn't just exist in religion. It exists in business as well as many other parts of our lives. So even if the word religion is triggering to you or whatever, just know that this book was written by a psychologist who has her PhD, and it's in the category of psychology and spirituality in the book section of a store or a library. And so despite the title, it's not as pigeonholed as you may think it is right off the bat. That said, of course, if you've had trauma within religion or from religion, meaning any of the internalized belief systems that you've tried to live your life in accordance with, this will also help you kind of navigate what's your voice, what's someone else's voice, and how can you maybe shift away from some of these ingrained beliefs and teachings that you've had as part of your life. What I noticed a lot is that although for me, I left the church over 10 years ago at this point, I thought that just simply not going to church anymore would be enough to kind of free me from those ideologies and that lifestyle. And over the last 10 plus years, I've slowly done a lot of deconstruction and taken my time of learning new things that maybe I would have shied away from while I was in an HCR, high controlled religion. And from reading this book, it put words to a lot of what I had been experiencing that I wasn't aware was a direct result of growing up in a black and white thinking, religious, fundamentalist sort of environment. So if any of what I'm saying resonates, you know who you are, but I really recommend this book. And like I said, it can even help you in the business place where you may not think you're being manipulated or controlled, but there are many times where the good behavior that's rewarded is a very manipulative honey versus vinegar sort of approach. And I'm not saying that I know the perfect way to run a business, but when you recognize these patterns, it can be helpful to practice mindfulness in those situations and just recognize that any of these environments that you maybe have to be in are not definers of who you are. And you can have your identity and your authenticity outside of those spaces. If you read this book, let me know what you think. I'd love to chat with you on it. And then the final book I want to share today with you is No Bad Parts: Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with Internal Family Systems. Now, IFS, I had never heard of it before until I read this book. This is also written by a PhD psychologist. I believe he's a psychologist. I read this whole book and now I'm like, wait, what's your credential? But anyway, he has a PhD. And the foreword is by Alanis Morissette. So any of my fellow millennials may appreciate that she wrote, the intro to this book and knows the author personally. Now, apart from that, we all have these parts within us. Maybe some of you think about a Friday night and you're saying to yourself, well, part of me wants to go out and part of me wants to stay home. That's a very basic example of these parts within us that may be in conflict with each other and sometimes supporting each other. And the book kind of dives into the fact that we have more than just one or two parts. We have a whole system of parts. They have different names and they work ceremoniously or again in conflict with one another, ultimately trying to keep us safe, maybe because of different things that happen throughout our lives. Now, what I wanted to share about this book, of course, it's escaping my mind right now. But maybe because I just finished reading it 30 minutes ago and I'm still kind of processing some of my key takeaways. But all in all, I never had heard of IFS before, and I didn't know that therapists in this field existed specifically to help folks work through their inner parts. Once you separate yourself with capital S from these parts, you can live in a world or in a life or in your body that's a bit more autonomous, a bit more congruent, and maybe more aligned with who you believe yourself to be, rather than letting these aspects of you take control out of nowhere. Sometimes we feel blindsided by our parts because they are protecting younger versions of ourselves that truly don't exist today anymore, and yet they still feel so real. And it's so easy to tap into those emotions, and sometimes we feel like we have no control over them. So if any of that resonates, this is the book for you. No parts, no bad parts, meaning all of your parts are good and they serve a purpose. So those are my top 5 books that I wanted to share. I've always wanted to be part of a book club or something like that. So if any of you have read these books, want to read these books, have books to recommend, I'm a bit of a book fiend, so please send them my way and I will be happy to check them out. Well, of course, I have to tell you about my 2025 resolutions. There's something I came up with called my year of no. I know we've all heard of my year of yes, or yes year, or yes attitude, meaning like you're going to say yes to everything that comes your way. I'm taking a bit of an opposite approach and choosing to say no to some specific things that maybe in the past I had a hard time saying no to. The 3 that I first identified were alcohol, added sugar, and dating. So I've decided for the year, for 365 days, and a little bit of December when I first made this plan, that I was going to refrain from those 3 categories. Now, I will say added sugar has been the biggest challenge for me. I have had a sweet tooth for my entire life, and just because I am proactively omitting added sugar from my nutrition intake, it doesn't make the voice in my head any quieter. So if any of you struggle with added sugar or have found a way to supplement or swap it out with something else, please let me know. That would be a huge help. I really appreciate that. But I'm learning a lot about myself through this experience, and just excited to kind of see what takeaways continue to manifest. And what I found so far is that areas of myself, maybe areas that needed healing or areas that I haven't focused on yet, were able to kind of bubble up to the surface and give me a chance to give them some attention, because I'm not so focused on these other areas anymore. So I've been able to turn my brain off a bit, to dating and alcohol and, sugar. I kind of sometimes will just call them the 3 Ds: dating, drinking, and desserts, because it's a little bit easier to remember that way. But with my mind turned off to those big areas, for me, I'm able to, again, focus on other areas that I've kind of lost sight of. In that same vein, I put together a list of the things I can do now that I'm single. And I would assimilate this list to a bucket list, if you've ever created a bucket list. I never had before, but that's what I would say this is most like. And I made it in a Word document with the checkbox bullets. So as I complete them, I can literally check them off and it crosses them off digitally. And as I go through the list and complete different things, I wind up adding more things to it and the list continues to grow. And yet what this has shown me is how abundant my life really is, how powerful I actually am, and how I don't need to wait for anyone or anything to make these things happen in my life that are so important to me. I think for a long time, I organically thought that these things would just organically happen on their own, through life circumstances or through people in my life. And that just wasn't the case. So now I'm taking it into my own control. I'm kind of steering away from the word control and trying to think of a different word right now. But anyway, I'm just taking it into my own hands and being more present with the things that I want to do and figuring out a way to own them courageously, confidently, and curiously. And that's been really exciting for me over the last several months. And I continue to kind of see where that takes me. I find it to be a helpful and intentional distraction from any of these emotional responses that I may have, specifically from saying no to certain areas. What do I get to say yes to now? And that's been really exciting for me. Circling back to the podcast, as I mentioned to you, I have many guests that will be on the show this year, a lot of feminine energy coming in, which I think is astounding and speaks highly to my own personal growth and development. So really excited to hear what all of these women have to say, what their stories are, and what they'll share throughout the year, and how I will be changed by hearing their stories too, because that always winds up happening. Every guest I have on the show teaches me something different about life, about them. Even if they've been my friend for a long time, there's plenty of things I don't know about them. And of course, ways that I can implement their wisdom into my own life and incorporate those takeaways going forward. Now, before I forget, very exciting news. I will be streaming this podcast on all of your favorite streaming platforms. So although I got my start on LinkedIn 5 years ago, back in 2020, with podcasting specifically, and then I slowly extended to YouTube, I will now be on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and again, wherever you listen to your podcast. So definitely tune in. Those will be audio only versions, but you'll be able to binge listen and catch up on all the old episodes, which by the end of this year, I'll probably have closer to 100. We'll see how far I go. But as of right now, I have over 70 episodes out there with all different guests and all different stories. And it's just really meaningful to me that I've been able to share my platform in a way that feels so expressive to who I am. I love meeting people. I love connecting. And I find that our journeys, when they overlap, are so serendipitous. They seem magical and meant to be. And the fact that you're able to cross paths with people again and again speaks to the intentionality behind that relationship and your choice to keep that person in your life and to have a reciprocal reaching out and receiving, when someone reaches out to you too. So it's a beautiful visual representation of how I try to live my life and the things that are really important to me. Okay, well, that is pretty much everything I wanted to catch you up on, it looks like. As I mentioned, I have a book and I will be working on that. I'm saying I have a book, it's not published, but I have technically written enough words to it to quantify, a book like this, which is a feat in and of itself. And I'm just really excited to see how that project will continue to unfold. I think in the beginning, I thought that getting enough words written down would have been my biggest obstacle. But now I'm finding that the organization and what I actually want to include and what I'm willing to let go of is presenting its own unique opportunity in this art form. And I'm reminded of a creative writing professor I had in college who always directed us to show him and not tell him. So I will do my best to show you who I am and how I'm becoming in this book, rather than simply tell you and rattle it off. I think you'll know what I mean once you pick up your own copy. But of course, once I actually have it published. So that'll be something that I keep you updated on. But this is pretty much what I've been doing the last year and a half from a personal perspective and how it's moved me in my life and changed me in different ways. So really appreciate you being here, part of this journey as always, and stay tuned throughout the year for all of the guests that will be on my podcast, Becoming You, as we listen to the nuances of life and they share their stories of becoming. Until then.
You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.